No estaban puestas. No me fijé.
Who am I?
Nadie, ni yo tampoco, espérate, Juan.
Sideshow.
Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Today is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. It is now 6:08 p.m. This is a local planning agenda, local planning meeting, public hearing and workshop of the city of West Miami. This meeting is called to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Item 2, roll call. Mayor Eric Diaz-Padrón.
Here.
Vice Mayor Juan Blanes.
Present.
Commissioner Candida Blanca. Commissioner Ivan Chavez Jr.
Here.
Commissioner Luciano Suarez.
Yes.
Mayor, you have quorum.
Thank you. I believe the public hearing has to become open this time.
Yes.
Public hearing is now open. Please read item A.
Yes, item 3A, evaluation and appraisal review of the City of West Miami's comprehensive plan and inclusion of a private property rights element pursuant to Rule Chapter 73C-49, Florida Administrative Code and Section 163, 31776, parent 6, parent I, 1, Florida statute. The City of West Miami City Commission, serving as the local planning agency, will conduct a public hearing to receive public comments on the 2023 evaluation and appraisal review of the city's comprehensive development plan, originally adopted by Ordinance 200508, Mayor and City Commission, serving as the local planning agency for the City of West Miami, and public comments on the private property rights element.
Dr. Murray, you want to approach the podium and give us a little background here?
Okay. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, fellow commissioners, of course, staff and the public. My name is Ned Murray. I'm the Associate Director of the George M. Perez Metropolitan Center at Florida International University. And I'm here tonight to provide a little bit of a background on the process for the environmental and appraisal report, the review that's required every 7 years, as well as an introduction to the private property element, which is now required under law as well. I do have a brief presentation, if is that something that you would like to
Do we have the presentation he previously
Mr.
sent?
Q? There you go.
Yes.
And this is really an orientation for the public, because, you know, obviously laws and state regulations are sometimes a little hard to follow for the average person, even us sometimes. So, as I said, every 7 years, we can just move. There's only a couple slides anyways, but,
You can just tell him to move it. He'll.
yeah, you can move. Yeah, next slide,
Okay,
please.
you just say, he just advised me to just say next, and
Yeah, okay.
he'll go to the
All
next
right,
page.
okay, next.
There we go.
I can't believe it's been 7 years already. It seems like we were doing this a couple of years ago, but that's how time flies. But 7 years is up. It's time for another review. This time around, not quite as extensive as last time, because if you will recall, when the changes were made in 2015 at the state level, there were a whole bunch of regulations and requirements that had to be adhered to at that point. Not as many this time around. So essentially, the process that we need to do now is really to update it if need be, that being the comprehensive plan, and obviously move forward with any of the new requirements that there are. And as I said, you're not required to make any air-based amendments, is what we refer to them as. Those always can be done later on, but for efficiency's sake and, other reasons, a lot of communities do their amendments at the same time that they do their evaluation appraisal report. So that's important to know. Then the letter or the notification that we've done the review, the city has done the review, that letter goes to the state, as we did last time. And once the state receives that and any other documentation that's required, they will then approve it as they did last time. Last time we did this, I think they get back to us in about 3 weeks. It was very quick. I think we submitted in June, they get back to us in July. So they move very quickly up there once we submit the letter. And this time around, the difference is this private property rights agreement, or element, has to be done in concurrently with this, because the state will not accept your EAR review without the private property rights amendment. So we have to do them in tandem. Okay. Next. So as I said, this is mandatory. We start the process tonight with the LPA meeting of the city of West Miami. So the only thing that's mandatory, as I said, is this element. An optional one, it's not an element, it would be a zoning change that a lot of municipalities are looking at, either to provide opportunities for their residents or to regulate accessory dwelling units. There is some language there if the city would entertain that. I don't believe that to ask Juan. There's provisions for ADUs in your zoning, no. But this is something, just so you know, a number of municipalities, not only here, but around the country, and it's being done for a couple of reasons. One, because of the cost of housing, having a unit that you could provide housing for a friend or family member, obviously could help them, but also help maybe pay the rent or the bills for the property owner, particularly if it's someone who's elderly and on fixed income. So that's one of the reasons. And the other reason is to regulate it. If you're going to allow them, a lot of the problems we've had, like in the city of Miami, has been with unregulated ADUs. So that's why it's being at least looked at by a lot of municipalities, but it's really up to every community, because every community is different in terms of their needs and how that would happen. And the way it would work under the law, though, what the state is allowing is that any residential 1, 2, or 3 zone, which would be single family, only single family, would be allowed that. So, but something to consider, And once again, this doesn't even have to be done tonight or as part of this process. It's something that the city could look at over time, maybe do a bit of an assessment in terms of your housing needs, particularly your homeowners, those on fixed income, elderly, who maybe could benefit for something like that. And at the same time, you'd be able to regulate. And that's been a big issue. Next slide, please. So the property rights amendment, is that okay, I'm sorry. Well, I guess I already talked about this a little bit. The fact that it's not mandatory, that we don't have to do the amendments right now, but as I mentioned, doing them right now, if need be, obviously would be, the pros would be it'd be more efficient and a coordinated effort. The problem is, if there's staff issues, in terms of time, if Juan and his staff or others are having to deal with other issues at this time, they have to go through that whole process, including the city manager. Sometimes it's better to put it off, particularly if it's not something that's really urgent. And from my hearing, there's nothing strictly very urgent right now. So, next slide. So the property rights element, it's important to know that the way the statute is written, there's some basic language that needs to be in it, and essentially you'd be in adherence with the new regulations if you were to adopt Objective 1, essentially. But what a lot of communities are doing is they've looked at other aspects of the private property element and adding other objectives. The first one, of course, being identifying specific property rights and states that local government will respect them. So that's the basic fundamental one. But then there's two objectives beyond that, which are optional. But once again, depending on the city, that you may want to take this on. The first one deals more with participation, engagement, the rights of the property owners in the city, and then the third one has to do with providing standards in terms of your decision making, providing more reliability and predictability and transparency to the public. So it's verbiage that you could add to the element, but once again, it's really up to you how much you want to further the element, how much you want to elaborate on it in terms of government transparency and predictability, the good government types of language that a lot of municipalities like to apply, particularly when it comes to private property rights, which is a very important issue, of course. So that is the process. I certainly open to any kind of discussion right now, any questions regarding the process, or for that matter, any of the details involving either the EAR review itself, where we go from here, and of course, as far as the property rights agreement, element, I should say, what we need to do relative to that. Once again, they're both required. We're hoping to get them in by the end of June, I believe, is what communications have taken place between the city manager and the state. Obviously, if we follow this schedule that we have right now with the LPA meeting tonight and then the subsequent hearings, we should be fine in getting both the documents up to Tallahassee well before June 30th. Thank you.
Madam Manager?
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Commission, this public hearing was advertised by the Office of the City Clerk. Not only was it publicly advertised because the comp plan and the EAR-based amendments and property rights element is a matter of public interest. We have gone ahead and made sure that the PowerPoint presentation was aired this evening on our website as part of this meeting today. And I think that will also work in our favor when it comes to DEO doing the approval process. I think our next step is to have another public hearing. I believe we need to have 2 public hearings on
That's
the
right.
matter and allow, again, public participation. That is the most important part of this piece. At which point Dr. Murray will help us redact language to the state that we have met the necessary steps and that, in fact, this commission approves whatever the outcome is from your process. Is that correct, sir?
That's right. That's correct.
And that comes with the adoption of an ordinance that Mr. Villalobos has and Dr. Murray have already been working on for the approval process.
That's correct, yes.
So it could well be that if it goes well and our next meeting is before June, if approved by the commission or scheduled by the commission, that we will be able to complete the process rather quickly.
That's correct.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
I'd like to comment something to the professor. I think this is one of the best things in the future of the city, because then we have the planning the direction of the future, and we will know what to do a couple of years from now. because we did before and we has been doing well with these guides. So thank you for coming. I think this is very good for the city and necessary.
Yeah.
So thank you for your presentation,
Yeah,
sir.
you're welcome. And of course, we've worked with the city for quite a while, worked with Juan. Your comprehensive plan and your zoning code are really good. And obviously, it's helped you grow the way you'd like to, but also regulate growth the way you're supposed to. And I think, help improve the quality of life of your residents, so congratulations. But, comes a time when, we have these reviews just to make sure that if there's anything we can add, anything we can do, given all the changes that may be occurring out there in the real world, in terms of the economy or, the environment, whatever it may be. So, but you're in really good shape.
May I add something else?
Go for it.
7 years passed by, right?
Yes.
You look the same.
Well, you all
You
do
look
too.
the
Feels like
same.
I was
You
just.
look good.
It feels like
You
I was
looks
just.
good. You're doing very
Oh,
well.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Commissioner. You do too.
So from a land use perspective, if there were concerns about, you mentioned that there's a high level growth in our corridors based off of our zoning code. If there was concerns about things like the potential to provide services with continued growth from the fire perspective or from the police, use of infrastructure, shared infrastructure of the community, if there was concerns about the future, our future code in terms of, electrification, things of that nature. If there was concerns about, whether we can incentivize more mixed-use development or incentivize condominium ownership as opposed to apartment development, would it be appropriate to bring those concerns at this moment in the year process, or would that be strictly in the comprehensive plan?
Well, this review, the evaluation and appraisal report is a review of the comp plan. It is to update it if need be. And like I said, to take on whatever current issues may be out there that you think, need to be addressed going forward. So that, this would be that opportunity, yeah.
Okay, well, so I think that there are some things, based off of what we've already seen and what we know from experience, things that might need to be looked at, and I named a few of them, but if you want to list them out again, density exasperated by the height that we allow in the buildings, so obviously the density per floor. So height because of density, its effects on services, fire, police, infrastructure, the lack of mixed-use development actually being taken advantage of, so the incentivization of mixed-use development, and the lack of condominium development, which the city has an interest in, the city would benefit from, and the lack of electrification, codes for the future. I don't believe we have any electrification standards for new development at the moment. So that would be my list of concerns on our current land use regulation in general. The last thing would be, I think we'll take that at a different time. That would be a general concern. I know that, and I don't know if it's in the EAR or in the comp plan, where it talks about the population expectations. Would that have been in the EAR or the comp plan?
Well, there is a population section of the comp plan, right?
Of the comp
Population
plan.
profile and
Yeah.
So,
demographics.
but you guys are doing the review so there's a population estimate in our last one that, if we're being honest, would seem to have been massively exceeded by the current development. So there's a line, and I wish I had it in front of me, where it said, build out of the corridor would lead to X thousand amount of population. We are not at build out of the corridor, and we've already exceeded that population. So that, I think, is another aspect that needs to be addressed, to be looked at to make sure that we have the right things for future planning. Does anyone have any? Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, if I may remind, or talk about the issue of where we're at with capital improvement projects. Is this something we take a look at now? We have made significant progress throughout the years with our capital improvement list, and I don't know whether this is the time to include, and we didn't talk about this during our organizational meeting, but is this the time to start looking at all of the needs that have been met with capital improvements?
Well, the review is really comprehensive. You have an opportunity to look at every element of your comp plan. And of course, one of those elements is capital improvements. And I know the city has done a lot with that over the years, particularly as it relates to stormwater. But yeah, I think it's always a good time to assess your progress in certain areas, and if there's a need that's not being met somehow, that this is the opportunity to be able to address that. But once again, like I said, it doesn't have to happen concurrent with this process. It's an opportunity, like I said in the presentation, to do it all at once and maybe be more efficient. But there's different different elements within the comp plan that are periodically updated, and certainly if the city feels they need to address a particular issue like infrastructure, that may be something that should be looked at least as part of the review process, because we're still in that review process. We don't have to make those decisions tonight. Those are the kind of things we'd want to take a look at, along with all the other elements as well, including some of the zoning issues that you mentioned, Mr. Mayor.
So how does the process work going forward? The two public hearings, for the public's sake, the two public hearings are for the purpose of what? Of identifying issues to be looked at, or?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So doing exactly what I
Yeah,
just did
right.
here?
Yes.
Exactly, okay. Does anyone have any concerns, questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor, I agree that I would like to see more condominiums brought to the neighborhood as opposed to rental properties where you have people that own in the community and they have a vested interest in our community. So I like that you touched on that.
The part with the ADU, I understand the policy behind it. I know some cities are, and the county has taken a big position on that. I don't believe that this commission has expressed the desire to look at that, so I don't think anyone's gonna stop me on that. This is for lack of a better word, efficiencies. So on that point, I don't think there requires any review from our city. So you tell me what the next steps are, so we don't waste any time.
Yeah, well, I think we continue the review, continue this discussion. We'll have another opportunity to do that. I will say this, though, when it comes to certain things like ownership and renter, that's not something that is really controlled through zoning. The way it can be controlled to some extent is the types of structures that would be allowed. Some, obviously, structures accommodate condos a little bit better, but we all know that condos have been converted in both ways over the years. So, but certainly ownership versus rental is not something you would have in your zoning code. It's more a question, and I think the point of mixed use is really important, because that's where a lot of all cities typically are going right now. Is to provide opportunities for people to live but also work,
Right.
create retail on the ground floor. That's a very, very effective way of really creating more opportunities within your community, for not only for housing but obviously for small businesses that could mature, especially on your commercial corridors. And the type of mixed use and the density is something that you can control.
Right.
If you've got densities already in place, though, that's something you really can't cut back on at this point in time, because that would be considered downzoning. And here we are, we're looking at a property rights element right now.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
not talking about lowering density, you know, I'm talking about lowering height, which is not, we're not talking about the formula, but,
Yeah, you'd have to be careful how you would do that. You don't want to take value away from that property. You know what I mean? But if it could be calculated differently, say height versus floor area ratio, you know, there's different ways you can calculate density. And I don't know if the city has looked at that, but you certainly, you don't want to be able to take value from anybody's property, because that obviously will
not.
create some issues, you know.
so,
But I have
go for it.
we may say question, and we may say this part of what happened in real life. The rental or condo do not depends on the compound, depends on the market. If the builders can make condos, if the financial business accept condos or not, because sometimes the market for the condos is okay. But the compliance have nothing to do with that, right?
No.
No,
Compliance have nothing to do with that.
no, you know,
That's just a commercial and
Right, but-
economical thing for the
but for example,
financial.
we have some, incentivizing structures for mixed use that haven't produced the results that we've intended, because we've had obviously a number of developments around the corridors. None of them have decided to incorporate mixed use into the structures. So, that's something to flag. Is there any, this is a public hearing, right, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir.
So, is there anyone, would it be appropriate to ask anyone in the public
Of course.
to, if they have any questions, concerns, comments, or anything they want to say on the item? Seeing none in the audience, Mr. Attorney, Dr. Murray, how do we proceed? Who wants to?
Well, I
Well, you
agree.
have had the opportunity of presenting to the public today's hearing. There was no presentation from anyone. We heard from Dr. Murray. So it's appropriate at this point to just close the public hearing and adjourn.
Oh, I didn't bang, what,
I'm so sorry. Is this the time to schedule the next public hearing on the property rights element and the ear-based amendments?
That's correct.
So we need to publish and provide reasonable time for publication purposes, and we have the next regular city commission meeting scheduled for May 17th. That is a Wednesday. I haven't checked with Dr. Murray or anyone until you all had an opportunity to weigh in on your schedules to see if we could do this again on the 17th at 6 p.m.
go
Okay
ahead.
with me.
Go ahead, Commissioner. I know you're out of town.
I'll be out of town.
That's fine. We'll survive without you, unfortunately. Is
It's okay with
everyone
you?
else good?
Okay with you?
Yes, thank you.
Mayo, it's okay with me?
Perfect.
So May 17th at 6 p.m.
All
All
right.
right.
We will send a calendar to everyone tomorrow. Thank you.
I'm going to close the public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. Is there any other items on this agenda?
Mayor, yes, item B.
Go ahead.
Which is a discussion in reference to repealing of ordinance 2022-07. This is by Dr. Murray and city manager.
This is just the one we did incorrectly, right? So we're
Yeah.
going to deal with that at the first reading?
First reading.
All right. Next item?
Item 4, discussion items, questions and answers.
I don't think there's anything we won't discuss in the commission meeting to follow. And that's the final item, right?
Yes.
Can I motion to adjourn?
Motion?
Before that, Your
Oh.
Honor, I'd just like
Hold the
to
motion.
see whether Dr. Murray has any suggestion as to timing. When would you suggest will be the proper advertising to have the next meeting?
Hmm?
14 days, which is 14 days from today, 2 weeks. For notices, it is considered reasonable time, and that's what the statute, if, I went back to the statutes from our last process, and they're talking about reasonable time. Okay.
So we're good?
So for next meeting, I have a question, Dr. Murray. for next meeting, then we're gonna have, we're gonna have an ordinance on first reading, which I read that it has to be advertised 10 days prior, at least 10 days prior to the hearing date. So if we adopt that ordinance on first reading and public hearing on May 17, then on the following meeting, which may be June 7 or June 31st, we have the second public hearing and the second reading of the ordinance. And we had a similar process done in 2022, and at some point, it was rejected by the state. So I don't want to specifically, like concerning my office, to make sort of the same mistake. So at this time, at this point, what is the next step? We report to the state after this hearing, after today, and then they authorize, and then we go to the public hearings? I'm kind of confused.
Would you get to the mic, sir? Will you get to the mic so we can have a record of it?
You would have the second public hearing, as you've already scheduled for May 17th, right? And you said and as far as the ordinance itself, that would need to be 10 days in advance?
But
Of
an
that?
ordinance needs two readings.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that kind of ordinance
Yeah.
to public hearings.
So the first reading could be May 17th,
17.
and then the second reading would be 2 weeks later.
June,
Yeah.
on the following
Yeah.
meeting, which is June 1st, I believe.
Yeah,
So that's the timeline that we more or less established, that we agree on.
that's right. So at that meeting, that's a regular meeting of the city commission as well?
Yes, yes.
The commission would adopt the element, or maybe, I'm not even sure whether you'd have a motion on the first reading to adopt. I'm not sure how that works locally. The state doesn't care as long as it gets adopted, but I don't know, is there a motion to adopt on the first reading, or do you have to wait for the second reading?
Well, the way that it works is that this is a public workshop,
Right,
and the commission has to go by resolution approving the recommendation that it was taken right now.
okay.
The recommendation that I understand is that we will go ahead with the your amendment. So therefore, it would be, number one, a resolution at the time that we meet with the commission tonight. And the second, in the meantime, before the next work meeting, we need to have a workshop or a comprehensive, I'm sorry, to draft a comprehensive plan, so we can present it at the parliament meeting. So we have to meet and see what the needs are for the next meeting to make the draft for the plan, okay?
Yeah, so once it's, once you've done your hearings, you will need to do two things. You'll need to approve the EAR report, and that's a letter, which we did last time. That'll go up to the Department of Economic Opportunity, and with that will be also the economic, we did the economic element last time.
The property.
The property rights,
Yeah.
an element, because they would have to be in tandem. Like I said, you can't, they will not approve your EAR review without the element. So the city will need to approve both those, both the EAR and the element at the same time, and they would be sent up to Tallahassee at the same time.
I would suggest that we have a meeting sometime next week and sort of sit down and draft something that it would be to your
Okay.
support, I guess.
Mr. Mayor, if I may add to that, the ordinance on first reading cannot advance to a public hearing unless there's a vote by the members of the city commission, by majority vote of its members, to advance it to a public hearing. So you are, I mean, the way we've dealt with ordinances in the past, you will have a vote on your first reading for the ordinance on May 17th, if that is the will of the commission.
Okay. We're all clear?
Call the
Everyone clear?
question.
Go ahead.
That
All
answers
right.
my question.
All right. Who had the motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All right. Maybe we adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.